Thank you so much to Borders for hosting this and to More Magazine for providing party bags, and Jessica, who has her first book coming out in 2009. And it's going to have a new title, but should we say what it?
It's currently called Invisible Sisters.
Invisible Sisters. And not that any of our sisters are ever really invisible. No. Is that the point? Well, anyway, thank you so much. And I am just here because I think one of the great things about being lucky enough to have this career that I almost didn't have is that I get to now share what I've learned with other people who have a dream or hope to write books or whatever. But I'm just going to kind of tell a little bit of my story, just because I think there's a big message there, which is that you can make every single mistake possible and still have everything turn out okay. I mean, I did absolutely everything wrong, and still it worked. So I have known since I was a little girl that I wanted to be a writer, and I kind of did the right things for a while. I was, the one writing bad poetry in high school that everyone thought was so profound and was really horrible, and I worked a few, writing jobs and everything, but essentially I went to college, majored in film and creative writing, and I really thought that I would, because I had the degree, I would just go into labor the day after I got my diploma and give birth to a book, and it didn't happen. And I guess I knew how to write, but I had no idea what to write. And I just needed, because my books are really about our lives outside our kitchen door, I needed to go out and live, go out and do something, but I didn't. Instead, I felt like an imposter, and I really just thought, why am I not writing? Maybe I'm not a writer. Instead of saying, just go out and live a little, and every bad job you work will give you something to write about. I mean, that's the great thing about being a writer. Someone's mean to you on the subway, and you have material, but I didn't know that. And I do think there's a point in your life when, for the longest time, you can get by on potential and talent, and suddenly you actually have to do something, and I really hate that still, but I kind of got stuck at that part. And so I hid for a lot of years. I followed my kids to their preschool and meant to stay for a year or so putting together a program, and I stayed for 16 years, which is a lot of hiding, and did some creative things, really just trying to find more and more ways to hide from writing a book, so I would just try everything. I wrote I wrote ads for a shoe company, which is out of business, probably because of me. I wasn't very good at it. I was continuity director of a radio station, WPLM, which stands for We Play Lousy Music. I just did a lot of things hiding. So anyway, fast forward, decades and decades and decades, and I'm sitting outside my daughter's swim practice at 5:30 in the morning, and it just hit me just like a ton of bricks that I might live my whole life and never once really go for it. And I was working. I was very busy. I was doing the swim mom driving, the karate for our son driving, all of that. But it was more painful to keep procrastinating than it was to actually write the book. So I actually sat in the minivan, and had I known that I would still be telling this story years later, I would have rented a Porsche or something, so it would be more glamorous. But the typical suburban story, out in the minivan, writing a draft of a novel. At that time, it was published in 2000, so this would have been 1999, and I didn't even have a laptop, and I thought, if I go buy the laptop, I am going to choke. And it's like, you decide you're going to have a business, and you print the stationery, and you buy all the things for it, and you wake up the next day and say, oh, I so don't want to do this anymore. So I didn't even do that. So every day I'd write on a legal pad, and then before I went to work in the morning, I would transfer it onto the home computer. And I wrote a whole book like that. I wrote a draft in about 6 months, really without talking about it, just kind of pouring all the frustration and all the time of not doing it, and just wrote a book. So what do? 6 months later, you have a draft I no longer had any writing connections at all. All my old friends were out there writing, and I'd lost touch with them because I was too embarrassed, because I wasn't doing anything, so I had no connections. I asked a couple friends to read for me, and I tell this part of the story because I think it's a really important thing for you to know if you're following this path or any other dream. The first person who read said, I think it's pretty good, but lots of good things don't get published. Now, I think this is someone who really liked me, but that was probably not the most encouraging thing to say. The next person said, this is pretty good, but you can't get published without connections, which is so untrue. I didn't know a soul. And so I thought, who needs friends? I don't need friends. I'm not listening to anyone. And in the beginning, I think it's kind of important not to protect yourself from other people's negativity. I sometimes don't think they even mean it. They just, suddenly you're all doing the same thing and one of you breaks out and starts going a different direction. It can be threatening to people, and you're trying to figure it out, so it can be kind of challenging. So that's one little piece that I always tell people to be careful about. Just, kind of keep it quiet. It's also really easy to talk a book away or to talk another idea away, because you're if I were to tell you what my next book is about, and I talk and I talk and I talk, I just wouldn't feel the need to write it. I often feel that if I knew what was going to happen next, why even write it? So I try to not talk a lot about it when I'm writing, and just kind of keep it fresh. So anyway, I didn't know what to do, so as I said, I had no connection, so I got a copy of that big book called Writer's Market that, I don't know if you've seen it. It tells you who you can approach and how to do it. And I found out, I didn't even know anything about literary agents. I had no idea how hard it was to get an agent. So I read about 2 literary agents that were so famous that I had even heard their names. And I wrote exactly 2 query letters, not knowing that people write letters to hundreds of agents. It's really hard to get an agent. And so I heard back from one of them almost right away, and she said, "Dear Claire, if your novel is half as funny as your query letter, you will definitely find someone. However, it won't be me." And I went, oh. So I said, oh, who needs an agent? I asked 2. And so I thought, I think I'll just try to get published on my own. So I kept flipping through Writer's Market, and I found out there were some smaller publishers that you could approach on your own. Now, I've been with Viking and Hyperion, and my publisher, Voice, is an imprint of Hyperion, and you can't approach them yourself. So, but there are others, and I found out about a little publisher and the reason you can't approach them is they can barely read all the submissions coming through agents. And so I found out about a little publisher called Bridgeworks that had launched people like Tom Perrotta, who I think is a really good novelist, and Lorna Landvik. And I think in a way it wasn't a bad idea to look for it that way. I just started picking books off the shelf that they weren't really like mine, but there was sort of a connection. So I wrote to that publisher, and they asked for 50 pages. I sent 50 pages. They asked for the whole thing. And then I got a phone call, and I tell this part because I instinctively think I did the right thing, but I could easily have done the wrong thing, so I'll give you the advice. They called and said, the beginning is great and this part is great, but there's a lot wrong with it, and started telling me. And I said, oh, thank you so much. I'm glad you told me what was wrong, because I'd really like it to be the best novelist. And I think to be the best novel it can be. And I think some of that felt like a little bit of a test. Was I going to be easy to work with, or was I going to be one of those authors who did not want to hear constructive criticism? Listen, if you get that far, it's real important to be able to take that advice, because it's a business, but also you have these smart people trying to help your writing get better. So anyway, they ended up, this very first publisher bought my first book. So 20-odd years of procrastination. Clearly, I was the person in my own way all that time, and it just sold right away. So that, at 45, I was 45 years old when my first novel was published in 2000, and then 5 years later, I walked the red carpet at the Hollywood premiere of the film adaptation of my second novel, Must Love Dogs. So best way you could ever spend a 50th birthday. And I think it's a hopeful story, because the great thing is, if my buried dream had been to become a rock star, I would have been in so much trouble at 45. But, you know, the thing about writing a book is you can do it at any age. And certainly my audience was there. My books are sort of the, obviously with my flip-flops, they're the beach books, the vacation books. And I think what they, just like a vacation, you're looking for something that's fun, fast, and probably over before you know it. But, you know, it's that kind of a feel, and that was the piece that I could bring to it. And I was also writing to my contemporaries, who were very much the fiction readers at the time. So anyway, that's kind of, you know, I just like to tell the story, as I said, because I think it is a hopeful one. And I've also met so many people who have had these buried dreams for so long. And, you know, life gets in the way of the thing that you were going to do. And finally, you have a little time to dust it off and think, you know, what do I really want to do? And I don't think, you know, it doesn't have to be something like writing a book. It just might just be that interest that you had, that you know, you pick up the paintbrush again, or you decide to design a garden or do whatever. So anyway, you know, when I think of the advice, that for one thing, I feel that one of the characters in one of my books says karma is a boomerang, and I think that's really true. So for me, being lucky enough to you know, have 5 novels now, and to have had bestsellers, and to have lucked out and gotten a movie, I just feel that it's really important for me to share everything that I've learned. And one of the ways I do that, I have a website, clairecook.com, and I have made, you know, little writing workshop videos to give people tips of what happened, you know, what I've done. I put all my questions and answers that come to me, I post up there. So I just share everything. So if you or someone you know, it's a good thing to check out. I keep adding to it. I'm also doing blogging. It's really an online writing workshop at gather.com. It's voice.gather.com, and you can just jump on to the end of any of the articles and ask your questions. And we also have we have handouts too, so make sure that you take them and share them, either use them yourselves or share them with anyone that you know. One of the things, I'm just going to go through a couple of really quick things that I get asked all the time that I hope are helpful, and then I really just want to answer your questions and tell you anything you want to know. One of the things I think is so true, you cannot, whatever your age, you cannot be a writer unless you're an avid, joyful reader. I think you just have to read and read and read everything you can get your hands on. I don't know, even 5 books in, well, I actually just finished a draft of my 6th novel, and I still have no idea how to write a novel. And whenever I say that, I feel like everyone's going to stand up and walk away. But I don't. I think you just feel your way through it. And I believe that if you read enough, a template forms in some mysterious part of your brain that tells you how to write a book. And that's what you do. So if you want to write a memoir, just go get a stack of memoirs and read one after another, after another, after another. Just keep reading. Even now when I get stuck, I started writing Summer Blowout. I got the idea on the set of the shortly after the Must Love Dogs movie was made. Suddenly, for the first time, I was doing a lot of media. Usually as an author, you don't do so much. You know, that's more of an actor thing. But suddenly, because of the movie, I was doing it. And as I went from TV station to TV station, I noticed that the same makeup artists and hair people would be at the different shows, which I thought was really interesting. And I'm one of those people who, you know, if I'm at a party, I'm talking to the caterers, because I just think what happens behind the scenes is really interesting. So I started becoming friendly with them, and one day it just hit me, you know, what if they were a family? And so the book became about a family of hair salon owners who also did television hair and makeup. And I love writing about quirky families, and it just kind of one thing led to another. But it started with those makeup artists, and I ended up, my research was I asked a couple of these talented makeup artists if I could shadow them because I wanted to me, a novel comes alive because of the authentic details. And I thought, if there's a hairstylist out there reading this book, I want the stuff to be right. So anyway, I followed them, and I sat in on wedding parties and all of that, which is, so in a way, for me, it was the hardest research. It sounds really silly to say this was research, but it was, trying to get all the details right. And the interesting thing is, I just did it to make the characters seem real. But now I'm getting email from people saying, I got the best makeup advice, and I can't remember any of it anymore. So anyway, one of the joys of writing fiction is the surprises, the things you didn't plan, often turn out to be the best parts of your book. That's what I love about it. Robert Frost said, no surprise for the writer, no surprise for the reader. And I don't know if that's true, but it kind of justifies the fact that I don't do outlines or any of that. I just kind of start with the characters and follow them through the book, and it's just a fun, fun way to write. So that's another thing. If you start writing with a very organized, analytical way, I think you miss some of the great stuff in your book as you go. And I think just staying open to those surprises is great. When I look at Summer Blowout, I swore I would never put another dog in a book because I didn't want to become known as the dog author because of Must Love Dogs. But so I was never, ever going to do it. So then when this family of hair salon owners came about, suddenly I thought, wouldn't it be fun if they had a little dog that they did product testing on, like not in a bad way, but like not like in a mean way, animal testing, but like they practiced their streaks on the fur, and they did things like that. And I thought, well, that will be fun. So my daughter, who was here, brought her little 8-pound dog home for Christmas that year, just as I was starting to write the book. And we, of course, have a very antisocial, bigger dog. And I thought, oh, no, our dog is going to eat her dog, and this is so going to ruin Christmas. But fortunately, that didn't happen. Her dog backed our dog off, and suddenly this cute little dog that doesn't look exactly like that, but a little bit, was just so adorable. I said, okay, I'll give it one scene. And so suddenly there was one scene, and then I said, I've got to get rid of it after this chapter. And then I thought, oh, but this would be so much fun. What if this happened, and what if that happened? So that's how the book kind of comes together if you stay open to those fun things. And now everyone is saying, oh, that dog, I love that dog. I'm so in love with it. And truly, the heroine of Summer Blowout, because she had just had a rather jolting experience, this is a big, not that anyone else in here has a dysfunctional family, I'm sure, but big dysfunctional family. And they're so close, in fact, that one of the half-sisters the heroine's marriage is on the rocks. It's so complicated I can't even say it. The heroine's marriage is on the rocks, and her husband starts dating one of her half-sisters. So it's a little bit of a mess to start out. Yeah, a little bit, and it never has happened in my family. We have rules about that. So anyway, when these things start to happen, what turned out is this heroine, who is just a little bit turned off, by men right now, she's had a bit of a rocky time, opens her heart up again to this little dog who follows her, finds its way into her life. And it ended up working out great, and I never planned any of it. And the things that readers and reviewers are liking the most are the things that, had I not stayed open, would not have been in the book to begin with. So that's just a message. And I think it's probably true with, if you were writing a song or painting a picture, there's some mysterious creative thing that happens, and it's just really important to do it. Switching entirely to the other side of it, when people say, oh, isn't it great that this happened or whatever, I always say, oh, yeah, I'm so lucky. And I say that, not that I don't think I am lucky, I do, but because it sounds humble, and because I am more humble with each good thing that happens, because I realize how easily it could be happening to the author next to me instead of me, and you just know how easily that could be. But if I'm really honest, the truth is I work very, very hard. And I think the biggest factor you can control is to work harder than anyone else, or as hard as everyone else. And that's something I don't think I ever thought of before. I think most of us don't give things 100%. We kind of get close, and then what I see with writers over and over again, I hear from aspiring writers who have a draft of a novel done, maybe a children's book they've written a couple scripts, and now they're thinking about taking ceramic classes. I don't know. I think creative people are good at lots of things, and it's really easy to jump and do this and then do that and try something else. But what I found myself, and truly, if that's your goal, you should do that. But what I found for me is when I finally stopped trying to do everything and just picked the one thing I was most able to do, that place where maybe ability and creativity intersect, and put all my energy into that and started saying no to a whole bunch of other things, I just started really moving forward. And I just work as hard as I can to get where I'm going, but I'm truly determined to get there. So it might be easy and it might be hard, but I'm in there for the long haul no matter what. And I'm not saying yes to every committee, every club, this is where my focus is. And that seems to have really helped a lot. So that's another piece of advice, to pick one thing. I think some of that for me of not really finishing things, once you finish something and send it out into the world, that's the scary place, because you have to hear what the world has to say about it. And it's off. I mean, there is going to be some rejection in any big thing like that you try to do. So you just have to face it, and I let myself be suicidal for 24 hours, and then I get over it, and then you move on to the next thing. So, some of that is just saying, I can do this. But it's really easy if you never finish something, you never have to find out about that side. So I found that was something I was doing a lot. And then the other is finding the discipline. It's like when you say you're going to start walking every day, and you walk the first 3 days, and love it, I'm born to walk, I love walking, and then you miss a day. And then you kind of wake up the next day feeling really bad about it, and then it's easier to miss the next day, and then the next day, and that's the kind of thing that suddenly the book doesn't get done. So my way of making myself do it is when I am writing, I personally work 7 days a week, but I write 2 pages a day, and it just nudges me along. I find if I take the whole weekend off, it's really hard to get back into it on Monday. And 2 pages is not so much that you can't do the rest of your life, but it just keeps nudging something forward, nudging it forward. And I feel like I'm living in it the whole time I'm doing it. I'm not losing the story or the characters. And so I live this just very, very cave-like existence, in front of my computer in my pajamas most of the time. Occasionally I get to the gym and I say, oh no, my shirt's on inside out or whatever. You're just kind of out of it. And but that's how you get a book done. And then the flip side of it is completely opposite, where you get to go out and do fun things like this, and you're just with people all the time, and it's great. So it's, I kind of like, both. I think I have both sides of that, my personality. I like time alone, but I also love people. So, that's another tip, to just get really disciplined. I actually write the pages on a calendar so that I can't cheat. I know people who say they write for 4 hours a day. If I did that, what I would do is check email for 3.5 hours, and then I'd write really fast before I, got in trouble. So I have to say 2 whole pages. And, other people might do something else. I mean, it's easy to write 10 pages one day, and then you don't write for a week. So I just moving it forward. And then the next day when I sit down to write, I reread only the pages from the day before as kind of a warm-up, and I kind of edit those, and then I go forward 2 pages. If I could go back to the beginning every day, I'd still be on chapter 1 of my first book. So I'd still be saying, and there's a point you can revise so much in the beginning that you start making it worse, and I find that happens. So then I get through a draft, leave it alone for a while. If you're a first-time writer, one of the best things to do at that point is to think of who the good readers are that you know, people who really care about you, who have no interest in sabotaging you, who are good readers. It could be just the person you know who is constantly reading. I don't think other writers are necessarily the best readers. I am a horrible reader. I just tell people how I would write their book, which is so not the point. But I think sometimes it could be a bookseller or a librarian or just your friends who read. But I would send it out to maybe 6 friends, send out your completed manuscript, and be a class act and put in a self-addressed stamped envelope, because then you'll get it back. And when I wouldn't open any of the responses until they came in, but I would ask each of them to maybe bracket the things that were either particularly good and put, a check or a smiley face on top of it, and then bracket the things that either caught you and you just got stuck and you couldn't figure out where they were going, or that you thought needed work. Like if, a name of a character didn't make sense, you'd bracket that and question mark or something, and then just write comments all over the pages, and then have them send them back to you, and then read them all, and which is painful because, none of us like to look at that kind of criticism, but go through them all. If one person makes a comment and it doesn't resonate for you, dump it. If 6 people say it, you kind of have to listen to it. And to that I would add, and this happens to me all the time, if you read one and it makes you really angry and you say, oh, but this person knows nothing, I can't believe I sent it to her, that's probably one you should listen to too. The ones that make you the maddest are usually the things you don't want to hear, and they're true. So, and then just go through and do a whole nother set of revisions based on that. And then at that point, you think about, are you going to start searching for a literary agent, which I would really, really advise you to do. I did sell my first book without one, and I did end up with a fabulous literary agent after that. But truly, you will always get a better deal, and it's not just the financial piece. You'll have someone advocating for you. It's really important. And the best way, this is my trick for finding a literary agent, most people send query letters, which is a will you represent me letter, they just grab names of agents, they Google, and they do a whole pile. The letter's all the same, they just change the name. And agents who read those letters know that. They can tell right away, oh, this person just wants an agent. They don't care. But I think you don't want just an agent. It's just like there are husbands and then there are husbands. You want the good husband. You don't want just any husband. It's like, and I have a good husband here, so I wasn't saying bad things about you, Jake. I just forgot he was here. I did. So I think what you want to do, you want an agent who thinks you are the best thing that ever happened, that they're totally in love with your work, that just really will get behind you and fight tooth and nails to get you the best publishing deal and the best support for your book when it comes out. And so the way to do that, I think, is to find books that you admire. And any agent worth her salt in her acknowledgments will thank her literary agent. And you find out who, and for instance, I would say in Summer Blowout, the first line of mine would mention Lisa Bankoff, who's my wonderful agent. And you Google the agent, and you find out who else that agent represents, and you write a letter of, from a place of heart saying, I so admire your client list, or I heard Claire Cook or some other author speak, and she was saying how wonderful you were. And I think my book might be a fit because, and then you're sending a personal letter, and I just think it ups your chances of getting represented. And I probably wouldn't have thought of doing that myself either until I had seen a little bit of the other side of the business. And, again, anything that you do, I think if it comes from a place of heart. I know my publisher, Voice Books, who I love, would dump me in a heartbeat if they didn't like my book. But they also love working with me because I work hard. I try to listen to advice. I try to get along with everyone. And I think there's also something to be said about grace and courtesy and just being a nice person. Hands down, people in any line of work would rather work with a nice person. So talent being equal, instead of approaching someone saying, oh, you are going to love my book and you would be so lucky to have me as an author. If you say, I'm so impressed with you and your work, and I'd be so thrilled and honored, and, if you would consider reading my fully finished manuscript as a first-time author, make sure it's done, and make sure it's been spell-checked a million times, and that the format is correct, that it's just really, it's like a new world. You have to follow the rules of the business. So that's the amount of advice I can think of really quick off the top of my head, but if you have questions about writing or just about any kind of buried dream that needs dusting off, what's interesting for me is that my publisher, which when I left Viking to go to Hyperion, where my editor was going to co-found an imprint called Voice, which is books targeting women at the center of their lives. I love that. It means midlife, but it's a nicer way of saying it. And certainly there are, college-age I know I have high school and college readers and women who maybe aren't, well, at the low center of their lives. It's an interesting target because I think when you look at the book list, it just, I find their list really appealing. But I have loved being there, so I think it's just important to think about. Often what I find is, that these books are about buried dreams, and I meet so many women wherever I go who have those. So I'm happy to. And men, but a lot of times the women, I think it's spending with children and, your lives. Often there's not a lot of me time for a lot of time, and then suddenly you want to get back to the thing that you wanted to do before when you have a little more time. But what questions do you have? I'd love to answer questions. Did you have something, Jessica, when you were talking before? Yeah. Well, do you want to?
Start it up.
Yeah.
You can sort of stand up and share the mic.
Yeah.
Sure.
We could sing.
I was just going to say, like half the Beatles.
Maybe I can be a rock star.
We can be a rock star. I love what you said about 2 pages a day, and I'm taking that to heart, so thank you for that.
Good.
One of the things that I notice in Summer Blowout and in Life's a Beach and in your other work is that there's a theme about women and their families, love and strife. And what do you want us to think about and recognize in our own families as we're in, was it the middle of our lives?
The center of our lives.
The center of our lives.
The center.
Yes,
I love that.
I
I just love it because I would never. It's so funny when it's almost like saying what is sort of the message or the theme. I so don't know. Like I could make it up, but for me, I always start with the characters, and that's what my books are about. So I hear that, Claire Cook writes about transitions or family, and I think, oh, I thought I was writing about the Shaughnessy's, So I kind of hear that, and I know on some level I'm doing that. I guess what I think, number one, I love books that are about family because that's how, look at the families here. That's how we live our lives. And often, particularly fun novels, or, it's that one generation, if they're about a woman who's divorced, it's just about who she's going to date, not about the whole family. And all of my characters, I think, are in transition within their own family. So, but there are always 3 generations. There's the heroine, and then the parents, and then the kids. And I just love that that's how we live our lives. But I also think none of us would change unless we were totally miserable, because it's so much easier to maintain the status quo. So, it's only that when you get just, as I was before I wrote my first book, it was so much more painful, as I said, to not write it suddenly than it was to write it. And we get to that place of change. Sometimes it happens when your, husband starts dating your half-sister, and that, then you have to change. But sometimes it's just, your life is not clicking anymore, and then you move on. So, yeah, I guess, I don't know if that answers it, but for me, and just family's so important. Family's everything. And then if there's another message in my books, the 2 favorite comments I get, one is, "You're writing my life. Have you been following me?" And I love that people say that all the time. And I don't believe a book ever fully exists until someone has read it, because you as a reader bring your whole life into the book. And people will say, people who have read Summer Blowout, some of them absolutely hate this ex-husband. I mean, they're ready to run him over. And others are like, he's not a bad guy. He's just kind of confused. So that's not my writing. That's you. That's what your life you've been living. So I love that. And I dedicated Summer Blowout to my readers for that reason, because not only wouldn't I have a job if people weren't supporting my books, but I also wouldn't know what my books were about if readers weren't reading them. So that's kind of a piece for me. But the other thing people say is, I can't remember when I laughed out loud like that, which to me is the biggest compliment of all. I'm sure that's not maybe a big literary aspiration, but it's my favorite compliment. And I think if there's a message to my books, maybe it is that life is for laughing. I mean, there's so much pain and suffering in the world without me personally adding to it, so I want to add the fun parts. And some of that is maybe writing your first book at 45. I'm not... if it's not your kind of book, that's okay. You can read something else. And I didn't have that perspective when I was younger. I would have been trying to please everyone and probably not pleasing anyone. Where one of the gifts of midlife, or one of the gifts of the center of your life, is, I really hope you like me, but if not, oh well. You just get to that. One day you just say, hey, And right, you're all nodding, and I just feel that I've embarrassed myself every way imaginable so many times. Like you're much more willing to take risk, and some of that is kind of related to that. You're just willing to jump in and try something, and I think that's another gift of midlife. So, what can I answer? Yes. Well, the question is, because nonfiction and memoir are really hot right now, is there a secret for fiction writers? Is that what, did I sort of, well, it is true. Right now, nonfiction is selling better, but my books are doing great. So somebody's reading fiction, and I'm grateful for that. Maybe because my market is very clear. They're fun beach books. Everyone takes a vacation, and now nobody can afford the gas, and a book's actually cheaper. So, I don't know. Maybe that's part of it. I do think it's like, the comparison I can make is with the movie thing. Since Must Love Dogs has been made into a movie, which was, definitely a Warner Brothers romantic comedy, the book is smaller and quirkier. Romantic comedies have been in and out of style so many times that your head could just keep turning. So maybe the nonfiction memoir thing, maybe the curve is just a little bit slower, or the pendulum maybe would be a better thing. The pendulum will swing back. But I have heard, and I don't know if this is true, that because there's so many books out there and, the internet and so much going on, we have so much information, that with a memoir, the platform is easier to understand, and it's easier to say this book is about that, and this is what I'm looking for. With a novel, with fiction, it's a little bit different than that, and maybe because my books are, you know what they're about. You're in or you're out, So I don't know, maybe having a clear market. I think having an audience is something most writers don't think about. You could write the most amazing book in the world, but if there's no one who's going to read it, if it's about something that isn't going to interest people, you're kind of in trouble. Unless your goal is to just have it be in print, but if your goal is for it to sell enough copies that they'll want your next book. So maybe some of that is if it's a novel and it has a clear market, that's a different thing. So I'm not sure. If anyone knew the answer to that definitively, every single person in this room would write that book. Even the publishers can't predict that, or every book would be a bestseller. And again, I give credit to my readers. That's why my books have done well, because they like them. So I don't know how you get that in the beginning. I honestly think I lucked out that my audience was there. I had not a clue they were going to be there, but they were definitely there. And, I'm sorry that I don't have a bigger answer, but... I hear that. The question is there a pressure on writers to make your books, more violent or lurid or, sexy or whatever? They just keep telling me to keep being who I am. I have never, ever felt any of that. If anything, my books get better every time I get a comment from, the really smart people who are now part of my editorial team, which is hard in the beginning. As a beginning writer, you've got to cobble that support group together. But once you're in with a publisher, it's great. And nobody is beating you over the head saying, make this character's eyes brown instead of blue. I've never, it's usually comments like, the one I get could be funnier. Or, you know, maybe the ending of that chapter is a little flat. But sometimes it's, I love that character. You know, I'd love to hear more. So sometimes it's just this encouraging thing. So I think the misperception, and this might happen at other houses, but anywhere that I've been, it's my books are so much better because of the editing. You know, you get so close to it to yourself. You could tell me, this is great. Or you could say, oh, my God, Claire, you really blew it on that one. And I kind of be tempted to believe you, you know, because you get so close. I can tell with someone else's book in a heartbeat, but it's much harder with, you know, you're too close to your own work. So, you know, I think, and I also think if someone doesn't want your book, it's really easy to blame the person. You know, it's like the guy who doesn't want to date you. What a jerk, you know. So some of that is, it just might be you haven't met the right guy yet, or you haven't met the right editor yet. So, and never take one person's opinion. It's so subjective. Think of all the amazing books that were rejected 200 times. So I say certainly listen to the constructive criticism. And I don't know if you know this, but there are good rejections, and that sounds so, you know, I mean, talk about oxymoron, but there are, when you get a personal comment from an agent or an editor, that's a huge step in the right direction, because usually you get a form letter. So if there's a comment that says, you know, this part was really, the characters were strong, but hello, you need a plot or something like that. Listen to it. You're getting good advice, because if they didn't think you had a chance, you'd get nothing. So as painful as they are, and as much as you just want to wallpaper your walls with the, you know, rejection slips, or just, you know, get rid of them immediately, take a deep breath. It's really hard, but try to hear what people are saying to you. And I do see that aspiring writers, a lot of time, they want to make it as about the other person's bad taste instead of listening to it. And maybe that's true sometimes, but a lot of times you just don't want to hear it. And I know I never want to hear it, but I make myself listen, and that's how you do it. And all these things are not just about writing; it's about life. You know, who among us doesn't want to be told we're absolutely perfect? We couldn't be better if we tried. And, you know, I'd love to think I could write a draft like that, but it's probably never going to happen in my lifetime. But I learn from every, you know, piece of constructive criticism, and I roll up my sleeves, and every time I do a revision, the book is much better. So, and I know other authors who are not so open to that, and they, you know, I think your editor will push so far, and then they'll back off, and, you know, it's your own fault if your book isn't where it is. So, what else can I answer? Any questions? Oh, yes. Yeah. How do you target your audience? I didn't have any idea. I think I naturally targeted my audience. I guess I would think, or I didn't think about it at all. I mean, I'm embarrassed to say that I never gave it a second's thought, but I think you should just think, who would read this book? Who would want to hear my story? Is it nonfiction or fiction? So it's fiction. So who would read this kind of book? What kind of book do you read? Because I think a lot of people read the kind of books they really want to write. So who's your favorite author besides Claire Cook? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Who's your favorite author, and who is his audience? Go to his or her audience. Go to their website. You can find out so much about an author from the website. What are they doing to target that audience? Who might those people be? And then you wing it from there. I mean, you know, your publishers can't even really do that. But, you know, it might help you get an idea. Some authors, when they're writing, they're not thinking about their reader at all. I hear that all the time, that it's just this very pure experience. For me, I'm totally trying to crack up my reader the whole time. I'm like, oh, I hope they like this. I mean, my books are a gift to my readers. I mean, I feel that all the time. So I picture my smartest and funniest friends reading the book, and I'm trying to give them a book that holds up for them, that they're not going to feel disappointed in. I mean, so that connection's very important to me. But that's not the only way to do it. Some people would say that's, you know, they wouldn't relate to that at all. But for me, there's you know, my That's very much how I look at it. So if that sounds totally crazy, don't do it, you know? But yeah, that's what I would do. Think about what you read and how that connects. Another trick for aspiring writers is to, I don't know what I'm doing with this there. Another trick for aspiring writers is pick up another book and use that as a template as you're writing through the book. And there's going to be a point, you're not copying it at all. You're just getting the rhythm of the book, and there'll be a point where yours will take a right, and that one will just keep going. But it's a great way to get a feel of it. This happened with Summer Blowout. I just couldn't get the ending. It just wasn't working. And I literally sat on the floor of my office and started pulling book after book off the shelf and reading the last two pages. And it wasn't like, I mean, I was going to copy somebody else's ending, but I just wanted the rhythm of a good ending. And then I, went to sleep, and I woke up at 3 in the morning and went, I got it. So I just, again, reading is what makes you a writer. When I hear of aspiring writers who don't read, I think, you just can't. And then I read every book on writing I can get my hands on. I call it self-medicating with writing books because it keeps me calm through the whole process. And if I'm feeling really neurotic, I reread Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott, which is the classic, book. If I feel like I need to pick up the pace, I read Stephen King's On Writing because he's such a great worker bee and he has so many great tips. Another one I like is Carolyn C's this is book tour brain, I apologize. Making a Literary Life, Advice for Writers and Other Dreamers. And that gave me some pieces I didn't get from the other ones. I just, read them like crazy. And that helps, too. I think it just kind of gives you a picture. But mostly read the kind of book you want to write, I think is a good one. Anyone else have a question? What books am I reading now? Do you know, every time I could have 8 books on my bedside table, and when someone asks me that question, I can't remember the single title of a book. What am I reading now? What's the name of the book in the Moore bag? Is there a book in there? I just started it. House and Home, is it? Yes. I just started that. That's really good. I'm reading a lot of books that I'm blurbing for up-and-coming authors. Let me see. What else have I just read? I'm reading a lot of nonfiction lately, only because I just finished. I delivered a draft of the book after Summer Blowout 2 days before this came out. So when I'm writing fiction, I tend to read a lot of nonfiction. I can never remember. I always say, when they say, who are your favorite authors, I say the ones who've been nice to me. So, well, who has read anything great lately? And then I'll start thinking, yell out a title. Anybody read anything good? See, you can't do it either. I put you on the spot. I just go totally blank. It's the one thing I can't do. Let me see. Mamie Medwed just had a book out of Men and Their Mothers, which is great. An author just showed up at one of my events in New York, and she just wrote a book called Manless in Montclair, which was really funny. I don't know. I just read everything. What have you just read? I'll put you on the spot. Oh, I loved 100 Years of Solitude. I read that. But would I have thought of saying that? No. That was really good. What else? Anything else that anyone has read? Eat, Pray, Love. I loved Eat, Pray, Love. Live, Pray, Eat, whatever. Eat, Pray, Love. That was a great book. I loved that. And, the structure of Elizabeth Gilbert's book, Eat, Pray, Love, was great. That was a wonderful book to read. Oh, interesting. Now, I found the first section really captured me and was my favorite. That was a great book. Yeah, there's so many. And, the amazing thing is there's just so many books out there. If you go to everywomansvoice.com, some of the books that my publisher is starting to publish, I think, are fabulous, too. I'm completely blanking. So we better have maybe another question so I won't finish on an I don't know note. Does anyone have any other questions? Well, please don't hesitate. Go to clairecook.com. Tons of tips for writers. Grab One of those. Any questions about Summer Blowout, I'm happy to answer. Life's a Beach is really taking off for book clubs. It just went into paperback about a month ago. And book clubs who are reading, they always tell me titles of books they've just read that were really dark and depressing and they need a fun read. So if you know any book clubs out there, if you go to my website, I made a video called Life's a Beach for Book Clubs, which is pretty funny. And the questions that they have asked, so that's been fun.
Speaking of book clubs,
Yeah.
in the 70s, my friend and I started a book club in our neighborhood in Chicago,
Uh-huh.
way before Oprah even existed.
You invented Oprah, because then she came to Chicago. Yeah.
It was our first monthly
Right.
flower, and then we set it up and we had a format and everything. And I found out 2 years ago, I left Chicago in '79. It's still going.
Isn't that fabulous? I hear from all the time. I call into them and do speakerphones. It feels like the party you didn't quite get to go to. So they're just, that's great.
She is now in Maryland and I'm down here.
Isn't that great that it kept going? Yeah, book clubs are so hot. I know with Life's a Beach, they put the reading group guide in it, and they put a teaser chapter of Summer Blowout and a question and answer, because that's what people are looking for.
They didn't do any of it.
Yeah, and they're always, I always hear from the book clubs what they served, and a lot of them met at the beach, which I think is really cool. So it's fun. I mean, it's just a great thing. I mean, reading, when I hear that reading isn't hot right now, of course it is. People are reading like crazy, I think. So, well, anyway, please make sure you get a handout, and I'm happy to answer any other questions. You can always email me at clairecook.com, too. And thank you so much for coming, and I'm happy to sign books, and thanks. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks.